Former Health Secretary and Committee Chair Jeremy Hunt told GBNews young doctors are choosing not to stay.
Well, what you're getting at the moment, Esther, is a vicious circle, because people are becoming a GP after 10 years of training. Maybe they're 28, 29 years old. They're finding that seeing 40 patients in one day in 10-minute slots is very stressful. And then they're saying, actually, I don't want to do this every day. I think I'll reduce it to 3 days or 4 days a week. But that, of course, puts more pressure on their colleagues.
An independent review has found Cricket Scotland to be institutionally racist. The report by the consultancy firm Plan for Sport cites 448 examples and failings in 29 out of 31 indicators. Cricket Scotland's entire board resigned before the report's publication this morning, saying that would allow new structures to be created to implement the report's recommendations. The final two candidates to become Prime Minister will face their first televised head-to-head debate tonight. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been trading blows over immigration, China and tax cuts. The Foreign Secretary and the former Chancellor are vowing to toughen controls on migration. Education Secretary James Cleverly supports Liz Truss. He told us that Truss is capable and has shown she's capable of making tough decisions.
I've seen how she's worked as Foreign Secretary. I've seen how she's conducted herself on the world stage. I've seen how she's taken long-standing, consistent positions on China, for example, on making the most of the fact we've left the European Union. I think that Liz has got an outstanding track record over many, many years on some of the issues that are facing the country today, and I really hope she has the opportunity to explain those fully.
Conservative MP for Thirsk and Moulton, Kevin Hollinrake, is backing Rishi Sunak. He told us that Sunak has a clear plan to take the country forward.
She's got all the features we need from somebody who can beat Labour in the next election, which is crucial, of course. He is a genuine, authentic Brexiteer. That's the most important thing right now. I think we need somebody who understands Brexit, who campaigned for Brexit, and somebody who can make the most of it, because I think there's a world of opportunity out there. Rishi has proven himself time and time again over the last 2 years, dealing with two huge crises in this country. First of all, the COVID crisis, and now the cost of living crisis. I think he's got the intellect and the ideas and the ability to innovate and implement.
Police are investigating a death threat that was made against Government Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt. A letter sent to the former Tory leadership candidate's constituency office reportedly threatened to shoot her in the head. It was received before she was eliminated from the contest to become Prime Minister. Hampshire police say measures have been put in place to protect her and her family. Sir Keir Starmer says the next Labour government will prioritise growth, growth, growth. During a speech in Liverpool, the Labour leader condemned the Tory government's record over the last decade, saying the UK economy is weaker than our competitors. He also criticised the two candidates vying to become Prime Minister, saying they don't understand the modern economy. Ukraine expects grain exports through the Black Sea to resume this week after months of Russian blockades. It follows a UN-brokered deal aimed at easing global food shortages. Government officials say the first shipment should leave from the port of Chornomorsk, with all other ports to begin exports within 2 weeks. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Does anyone remember Mallet's Mallet? That classic kids' word association game where two contenders had to breathlessly volley a load of related terms without pause, lest you be walloped over the noggin by an inflatable hammer. I'm starting to think tonight's leaders' debate would be far better conducted under the auspices of Retro TV's Timmy. So vacuous a vocab vomit the competing campaigns are turning out to be. It's like a giant Tory word cloud has exploded over Britain, and even Sir Keir Starmer has been struck by the rhetorical rain. Having accused Truss and Sunak of Margaret Thatcher cosplay in their battle for number 10...
You will see a clear contrast between my Labour Party and the Thatcherite cosplay on display tonight.
Oh, anyone would think the Labour leader had been watching this programme last Monday and nicking my sentences. Or you could also be forgiven that Sir Keir Starmer had raided the bins of Chequers to get Boris's 2019 manifesto speech and went to ToryConferenceForYou.com to buy a lectern, a three-word slogan and a double flag backdrop. And yet, considering the UK's biggest growth market appears to be political gumph, not a lot seems to ever actually get done. Backlog Britain continues to sulk in the corner while we change Prime Minister every few years. Perhaps they're all working to generate enough hot air to power us through winter without Putin. Because that, dear viewer, is a crisis that really does need more than a flimsy plan scribbled on the back of a briefing note. So on we go with the leadership debates, and the next one is tonight, before Rishi and Liz will then travel the country selling their various policies to various shades of blue. So let's get the latest from our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's in Westminster. Darren, what sort of things should we be looking out for in the debates tonight? What will be the big topics, do you think, and the big points of contention?
Well, clearly there is a massive dividing line, isn't there, Alex, when it comes to the economy and indeed the approach to cutting taxes. Rishi Sunak has made it clear over the last couple of weeks, as a former Chancellor, he thinks it is a fairy tale or fairy tale economics to try and want to cut taxes at this moment in time, given that inflation is so high and that the government debt is high and rising. But Liz Truss has very much put a marker in the sand, saying that she will cut taxes from day one. It's one of the reasons she's in the final two, because she's made it clear that's what lots of Conservatives want to see, and she is determined to deliver it. And we saw those arguments, didn't we, play out in many of the Sunday papers yesterday, but we've also seen quite a few personal attacks as well from supporters on either side of this debate, laying into the other respective candidates. And so I think tonight is going to be a bit spicy, a bit tasty, if you like, and I say that because this is the first time we've seen the two properly go head-to-head, but it was only just over a week ago that they clashed on that ITV debate. I suspect on the BBC tonight it's primetime television, particularly for Rishi Sunak, who is somewhat behind in the polls, someone who is portraying himself as the underdog. Is he going to kind of take off the gloves, if you like, and properly go for Liz Truss in order to try and win this debate? I suspect he might, because frankly he's got very little time if he wants to make up that difference, Alex. And the reason I say that is because ballots go out to Conservative Party members next week, and most of them tend to vote pretty early, so he hasn't really got much time to make up. Yes, the campaign's going to last for 5 or 6 weeks, but ultimately people may make up their decisions and their minds and votes in the next week or two.
Darren, thank you ever so much for the update. Well, I'm now joined by writer, broadcaster and former Conservative MP Edwina Currie. Edwina, last time that we spoke, we were both rather taken with Kemi Badenoch, and sadly that is not who we are left to choose between her and someone else, are we? So when it comes to the Margaret Thatcher beauty contest, who's winning, Sunak or Truss?
Well, it certainly isn't Boris, who, as you can see, has joined me in the room here. We had him at a party here yesterday, which raised over £1,000 for the Conservatives. We did invite Rishi, who was just up the road in Cheshire, but he wasn't able to come. Calling on Margaret Thatcher as the icon makes a lot of sense, I think, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, of course, she won 3 elections on the trot, and enormous majorities, made Boris's majority look tiny by comparison. And she did so by appealing directly to the public and talking to them in ways that the literati and the North London crowd said, couldn't be done. They were patronising the ordinary working people, and Margaret was speaking to them in terms that absolutely chime with them. And one of the things that she said, and this is, I think, the other reason that she's being called in aid, one of the things that she was very clear about is that you can't tax your way out of problems. You can't actually borrow so much that you're going to cause problems to future generations. She was very much for sound money. She wanted to make sure that we did have taxes as low as possible. I mean, bear in mind when she started, we were talking about taxes of the order of 80%, 60, 70, 80% on income tax. So she had plenty of scope. Because our taxes are much lower now as a result, there's rather less scope, I think, for tax reductions. I would be very worried indeed if we were just going to spend a lot of money without having the money to pay for it. You know, we are already spending an awful lot, Alex, on levelling up. As you know, I'm up in the Peak District in the north of England. We've just been told we've got £10 million to renovate the centre of Buxton. About £150 million is being spent on the Hope Valley rail line between Manchester and Sheffield. First big update for many, many decades. A lot of money being spent on the railways in Manchester to improve access and so on. So there's money being spent. The idea that I think Liz Truss is putting about that we could spend a lot more money and we could cut taxes, I personally think is dangerous nonsense. I would be very worried indeed if we adopted that as a policy.
I mean, we've seen the two candidates go at each other's throats a bit this weekend over the topic of China as well, with the Sunak camp accusing Truss of essentially letting in these Confucius academies while she was overseeing education, which have turned out to be, well, a few of them looking pretty dodgy from the outside. And Truss is there accusing Sunak of opening the door to China economically. I mean, does this just end up being a zero-sum game when you've got, you know, one or the other is going to become our Prime Minister and they're dragging each other through the mud?
Well, members of the Conservative Party are an extremely shrewd bunch of people. It's one of the reasons why we tend to be in power far more than the Labour Party. I mean, the fact is that both of them have been in cabinets during which we have, and indeed in government, even as junior ministers, during which time we have cultivated China, and it turned out to be a big, big mistake. It turned out to be a big mistake because China wasn't playing nice. They were busy trying to subvert our security. And we know that now. They're not an improved alternative to Russia. So when they start criticising each other like that, we Tories will go, naughty, naughty, you're supposed to be nice to each other. You've worked together as a team for a long time. You probably will work together as a team in future. And we would much rather you were actually quite pleasant to each other and show the rest of the world how it's done.
Yeah, Edwina, couldn't agree more. That's the way we're supposed to be, stiff upper lip and polite as always, as you always are, of course. Edwina Curry, former MP there, joining me. Well, also joining me throughout the show today is Christopher Hope, Associate Political Editor at The Daily Telegraph. Christopher, I mean, it's just hotting up now, isn't it? This battle royale for number 10, and it's kind of getting ugly.
Well, it will do, and it has to already today with Nadine Dorries having a go at on cost of living issues there, with Rishi Sunak wearing his £400 Prada shoes, even though they're 10 years old. You can just imagine Labour totting up this whole idea of multi-millionaire Rishi trying to defend the government's policies in the next election. And I think tonight, this BBC debate, as Darren was saying there, is so important. These ballots go out to the Tory party members next Monday, the 1st of August. Most of them vote very quickly, historically, although you can change your vote up until the final deadline of 5 p.m. on September the 2nd. So until that point, you can change what you want to do about your vote. But I think many people think the next week is when Rishi Sunak's got to really hit Liz Truss hard, show how she's quite a clumsy debater. He's got all the answers. What I think's happened so far, until really this weekend, was that Sunak was playing a long game with an election in mind, whereas Truss is playing a leadership contest, offering tax cuts that Edwina finds difficult to stomach, but probably that's what she has to do to win over the base. Tax cuts immediately, corporation tax reverse, and other areas. And that's why I think you're seeing more of the red meat from Rishi Sunak in recent days to get back on tune with selling what he will do to the base.
Yeah, and briefly, opportunistic Keir Starmer seems to be a bit of a canny operator, basically singing from the Conservative hymn sheet while they go at each other's throats. Well,
that was a speech that you may have said before that you could easily see Boris Johnson making, couldn't you? And him going after growth is exactly what you should be doing. He is now, back in the 90s, if that's the playbook they're using, Labour at some point start to not talk about the Tories at all and just give the country, our readers, your viewers, an alternative manifesto, a prospectus for running Britain, and that's what's going to happen next. I think if they start almost ignoring the Tories and offering up what they've got to offer as a positive thing, we've got a real chance.
And you thought it was going to be a quiet summer. Chris, thank you so much. I want to know your views. Are you convinced by either of them? Do you think Trussonomics will collapse our economy, or is tax cuts the order of the day? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews. You're with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, the NHS in crisis again. We're going to be talking about how the NHS is facing its worst staffing shortage in history. Time now, though, for a short break and a check on the weather forecast.
Hi
Hi there, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Bright spells for many today, but also a few showers just about anywhere, and it'll be just a little bit cooler compared with the weekend. Low pressure is moving away into Scandinavia. Behind that, well, a cool north to northwesterly airflow and a couple of weather fronts just dangling in for southern parts of Scotland, northern England as well. That's where there'll be the focus for the showers. Some heavy downpours for southeast Scotland and northeast England. Perhaps the odd rumble of thunder. Elsewhere, showers more scattered. Just about anywhere could catch one, but equally there will be some bright spells. Not a great deal of sunshine, a lot of cloud around, and feeling a bit cooler compared with the weekend. Still the potential for 25 Celsius in the southeast and still feeling quite humid here, whilst it will be quite fresh for the north of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. And this northerly breeze will push areas of cloud and some showers southwards across central and eastern England overnight. With the cloud, for many, it's going to be a mild night, 13, 14 Celsius in the south, 11 to 12 in the north. A bright start for many on Tuesday, but still areas of cloud floating around for northern, central and southeast England. And here we'll see some showers developing once again. Also showers drifting in for Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between some sunny spells, I think the best of any dry and sunny weather will be across Wales and the southwest. 22, 23 Celsius here. 25 for London, 16, 17s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. So feeling quite fresh. And then the breeze eases finally on Tuesday night. And with light winds, with clear spells for many, a cooler night to come. Showers in the north and the east continue for a time before eventually disappearing. And Thursday and Friday, well, it's roughly similar. Bright spells and showers and temperatures not far from average.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. You're with Alex Phillips on GB News. Now, according to some MPs, the NHS is facing its worst workforce crisis in history. The House of Commons Health and Social Care Select Committee that's produced the report says tackling the shortage must be a top priority for either Rishi or Liz when they get into number 10 in September. The MPs say that England is now short of 12,000 hospital doctors and more than 50,000 nurses and midwives. But what to do? Selective migration? More involvement from the private sector? Or, given that the NHS seems to have been in crisis every year of every decade as long as I can remember, is it just time to rethink the lot of it? Well, let's talk now to former NHS Trust Chairman Roy Lilly. Roy, it's a bleak warning for MPs, along with the longest backlogs in history and chronic underfunding. What do you make of their assessment?
Hello, Alex. Well, I mean, I tell you what really surprised me. The select committees are balanced. They're Labour, Lib Dems, Scott Nats and Tories, and it's all balanced. And it's very rare that you get a select committee report like this that is unanimous and so excoriating about government policy. And let's bear in mind, they've been in for 12 years. So, I mean, yes, there is a workforce crisis. There's a huge shortage across the whole system. But to have the MPs come out in this way unanimously, I was really surprised at how toxic the report was.
I mean, the focus today is on staff shortages, and it strikes me that we still cap the number of people going to medical school. In fact, the bills that students are left with now, having done what is, 7 years of training in the end, are enormous. It might be that we need to rely increasingly on getting migrant doctors and workers who might not be prepared to leave their own countries to come and work here. So what is it that we can do? Because we need people to fill these jobs vacancies yesterday, not in 7 years' time.
No, I agree. And it's not just here, Alex. It's a global shortage across the whole health and care spectrum. All countries are scrambling to try and find staff. I mean, we've had the impact of Brexit, which saw quite a lot of European clinicians go home because of their right to stay here, and there was difficulties in getting them back here, and their right to access medical care once they're here. So the number of coming in from Europe has dropped right off. We've been bringing nurses in from the Philippines, and the Philippines have been overtraining the number of nurses and sending them globally, really. But I was reading that just last week, some politicians in the Philippines are saying, well, hang on a minute, because we don't have enough nurses ourselves for the Philippines now, and they've just put a cap on the number of nurses that they can send overseas. India is facing the same problems, big shortage there, and they're trying to stop nurses leaving the country. I mean, I know it's not very helpful, but there is no immediate solution. It takes 7 years to train a doctor in the basics, and then probably 10 years before they're really ready to rock and roll. And on top of that, another 7 years, or 4 years, if they want to become consultants. So, I mean, we could shorten the length of training perhaps and teach them less and have them practice under supervision. It takes nearly 4 years to train nurses. So whatever you do, even if the government said, well, we're going to put every penny we've got into training medics and clinicians, we wouldn't change anything probably for 10 years. And that's the other point that the select committee, the point that they make is there is no workforce plan. And there's been no workforce plan since 2019. Now, you can see why. If you have a workforce plan, it tells you how many you've got to recruit. If you know what you've got to recruit, you know what the wages bill is. And if the wages bill goes up, somehow it's got to be paid for. So this is it's the answer that no politicians want. And we haven't had a workforce plan. There's supposed to be a workforce strategy report, not a plan, by Christmas. And what good that'll do, I don't know. They're just kicking the can down the road.
I mean, the former head of the East Kent Hospitals NHS Trust has come out and made the suggestion that perhaps patients should be charged £8 a day for every day they spend in hospital. I mean, that's off the back of other suggestions in previous years of charging patients for missing appointments. Is it time, do you think, that instead of treating the NHS like a sacred cow, we do look at some radical, perhaps only short-term interventions like this that could create extra funding but act as a deterrent for wasting NHS resources too?
Well, I don't see how charging people £8 for being in hospital is going to get us any more nurses or any more doctors. It's just going to give us more administrators to collect and count the £8 and then take people to court because they haven't paid the £8. Look, it's simple. I mean, I don't care one way or the other. I mean, I've been in and around the NHS for 50 years. I've studied health service systems all over the world. It's the same everywhere you go. If you're going to pay for your health system by taxes, it comes out of your right-hand pocket. If you're going to pay for your taxes, pay for your healthcare out of insurance, it comes out of your left-hand pocket. It doesn't matter which pocket it comes from, you still have to pay. Now, the NHS is regarded as one of the most efficient health systems in the world. I mean, it's had a beating through COVID, and no healthcare system has come out of it very well. But it's one of the ratio to staff to management is one of the lowest in the world. The amount of money we spend on management is one of the lowest in the world. And if you look at pre-COVID productivity, the productivity the NHS produced every year was about 1.5%, 1.2, 1.5%. If you look at the productivity of the UK economy as a whole, it was 0.4%. So actually, I mean, this is the Office of National Statistics data. So if you look at it, the NHS outperforms the wider economy. I mean, I understand why people get thoroughly fed up with it, and I get fed up with it myself. And you see stories of lying on the floor, for 12 hours waiting for an ambulance to come. That's no good to anybody. It's just that the NHS doesn't have the capacity. After the World Banking crisis, it had 10 years of flatline funding. Health Education England, who was supposed to be delivering the workforce, had their budgets cut from 290 million to 89 million. 290 to 89 million over 4 years. That's why we don't have the staff now. The NHS can do the job if it's got the capacity.
If the phone call came in from Whitehall after this programme and someone said, saw you on GB News, Roy, great stuff, you seem to have lots of good ideas, how do we solve this problem? What would you tell them?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd stop reorganising it. That's the most important thing. Secondly, I'd try and stop staff leaving. So, for example, nurses. There are hospitals that don't provide free car parking. There are hospitals that don't provide canteen facilities 24/7. There are hospitals that don't have flexible rotas. So if you're dealing with, nurses with kids and what have you, you've got to be flexible. So first of all, I try and stop 400 nurses a week, 400 a week, leaving the NHS. So I'd start there. Then I think we'd start on a big program of recruitment and training. I mean, they took away the nurse bursaries, and that saw a dip. This year, for the first time, we've seen recruitment into or applicants wanting to come into the NHS as nurses drop by 8%. We have to stop that. We have to rebuild the context and the joy that there is in doing the job. So I try and stop people leaving. Then I turn my attention to better recruitment. I mean, we'd have to think about whether or not we go back to the bursaries. My view is that we should go back to the bursaries because we do get quite a lot of mature students coming in as doctors and nurses, and it's very difficult for them to manage. The problem if you're a doctor or you're a nurse, unlike ordinary students in uni, I mean, you're at uni, you get a job in a bar or do a job at the weekend to eke your money out. You can't do that in the NHS because you're working shifts even while you're training. So I think, the truth is there is no big bang. There is no magic button I could press, but there are a lot of little things that you can do to try and make the whole lot a lot easier. But the chickens are coming home to roost. The sky is dark with chickens coming home to roost because the NHS has been neglected. How we get out of this, God knows.
Oh, Roy, well, that's a pessimistic note to end on there, but thank you so much for coming on the programme. Fascinating insights, fascinating. Roy Lilly, who's a former NHS Trust chairman, gone, he says, all these things that needed to happen should have happened decades ago. And it does make me question why consistently both parties treat the NHS like a time bomb and also like a sacred cow. It needs more money, it needs being reformed, it needs this, it needs that, but no one dares actually talk about why it's failing and really do something bold about it.
It goes back to David Cameron when he became leader back in 2006. In that speech to the party conference, he said NHS, he won't touch it, because at that point the narrative was the Tories want to privatise bits of it. Now I think figures show that Labour actually brought more privatised work into the NHS than the Tories did. So the Tories have run away from that. Added to that the Andrew Lansley reforms back in 2012, and that created these combined commissioning groups, and that took the power really away from ministers. I mean, essentially, like one advisor to a former health secretary, now former health secretary, has told me it's like a franchise. You have no actual control over the thing you're judged by. It's really hard, I think, for the politicians, tiny violin time, really hard, but difficult for them to defend what's going on because they lack a lot of control. There's a guy called Tim Briggs, Professor Tim Briggs, a consultant surgeon. He's got a project called Get It Right First Time, GIRFT in the NHS. It's basically, he's saying there is enough money there just spend it more effectively and more efficiently. The issue of manpower or woman power is completely different, of course. As Roy was saying, it's a global problem. And what can you do about it? One idea that Steve Bartlett looked at when he was number 2 in health, he told me a few years ago on my podcast, he talked about having the nurses training just 1 year less. Apparently that's possible, that's allowed, not 7 years, but 6 years. You can do that without risking patient safety. Is it possible to do that, to limit? And then by doing that, of course, you get more nurses coming through on the stream, more qualified nurses more quickly. One idea.
Yeah, lots to go over there. Chris, thanks ever so much. Well, if you've got thoughts, do email them in gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet at gbnews. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, we'll be talking about travel chaos as holidaymakers set off for their summer breaks, or not set off, perhaps. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Rosie.
It's 2:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Appeal court judges say they'll stay the ending of Archie Battersby treatment for 48 hours to allow his parents time to approach the European Court. Comes after they ruled doctors can lawfully stop providing him with life support treatment. The 12-year-old hasn't regained consciousness since suffering an accident at home several months ago. His parents were appealing an earlier High Court ruling which upheld doctors' conclusions that he was brainstem dead. An independent review has found Cricket Scotland to be institutionally racist. The report by consultancy firm Plan for Sport cited 448 examples of racism and failings in 29 out of 31 indicators. Cricket Scotland's entire board resigned before the report's publication this morning, saying that would allow new structures to be created to implement its recommendations. The final 2 candidates to become Prime Minister will face their first televised head-to-head debate tonight. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been trading blows over immigration, China and tax cuts. The Foreign Secretary and the former Chancellor are vowing to toughen controls on migration. Some of the UK's major cities are bidding to host Eurovision 2023. Sheffield, Manchester and London have all announced their intention to apply after Britain was asked to replace Ukraine. Boris Johnson says the event will celebrate the Ukrainian people. Earlier this year, the UK was runner-up to the Ukrainian entry Kalish Orchestra. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to We Need to Talk About. This is GB News and I'm Alex Phillips. This weekend, holidaymakers, lorry drivers, in fact, anyone trying to get out of the country by crossing the Channel were left, well, cross by being stuck in hours of traffic miles away from the port of Dover. Many were trying to use ferries and the Eurotunnel, but were left instead needing the loo and trying to amuse the kids in the back of the car in their own little Kent hotspot of holiday hell. Bumper-to-bumper traffic has now been cleared, according to port officials, with 72,000 vehicles processed over the weekend. Of course, the French and UK governments blame each other. We say there were not enough French border officials on duty, and they say Brexit means passport checks take longer. But just when you thought it might be safe to cross the sea, more than 40,000 rail workers will strike on Wednesday in a dispute over pay. Widespread disruption is expected. So, are we facing a summer of travel chaos? We're now joined by Julia Lowe, Bowie, Syed, Chief Executive of Advantage Travel Partnership, an independent group of travel agents. Great to have you on the show, Julia. I mean, it's just more bad news, isn't it? First of all, it was the airports. Now it's the ferries. What next?
Well, just hearing you outline it there makes me extremely depressed. I mean, the only thing I can say with confidence is the vast majority of people will be able to travel this summer. They will be able to get away. There are bottlenecks and there are disruptions that we've seen quite clearly that have taken place, but the vast majority of people will be able to get away on their travels.
In terms of what went on in Dover, they're bracing themselves, as I understand, for more disruption on weekends to come. And there seems to be a backlog of people wanting to get away. The normal holiday handover time is the weekend. I mean, do you think anybody planning to travel across the Channel and is booked for a weekend needs to really start thinking about preparing for that journey well in advance and pricing in a huge old wait?
It's really difficult, isn't it? Because the last thing you want to do when you've waited so long to travel is to feel even more anxious, not knowing whether you're going to be leaving on time. But I think the best thing to do, we know there's a pent-up demand. We know there are an awful lot more people travelling now. The best thing to do is to be prepared. I think if you're prepared for a delay, that's the best advice that I think any of us can give. Make sure you've got water, food in the car if you're travelling by ferry, and also the worst thing also is having kids that are bored. So have lots of entertainment for the kids as much as you can in the car. Be prepared, and then hopefully the delays won't be as bad as you're anticipating.
And what about the airports? Of course, we've seen, those sort of Jenga towers of suitcases where there are no baggage handlers on shift and queues snaking out of airport terminals. Is the situation getting a bit better there, or is that just building up to yet another pressure point again?
No, it's definitely getting better. And again, as I say, most people are able to travel on their flights. Most cases are arriving on time. There have been bottlenecks and issues at really peak periods of time. But we are seeing that starting to ease. And there's a couple of measures that have been put in place to really help that. There have been caps on flights, so that reduces the number of flights that airlines can operate. And that's enabled them to make sure it builds resilience in the system and enables them to guarantee almost that those flights that are on schedule will depart on time. So there is some slack being taken, there is some capacity being taken out that will help alleviate any of those pressure points we've seen.
Julia, thank you so much for coming on and giving us a little bit more detail about what to expect this summer. Julie Lowe, Bowie Syed there, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Advantage Travel Partnership. Chris, I was just thinking then, people want to go to the doctor, there aren't any. They want to go on holiday, there's no baggage handlers. They want to go to the local pub and they probably don't have enough people pulling pints. Where did all the humans go?
Well, it's not. I don't think it's all Brexit's fault. I think there's you can bring people over here on all sorts of visas nowadays. I think there's a million jobs unfilled, aren't there, in this country?
But it's happening elsewhere. It's not just Britain. This seems to be happening everywhere. And I wonder if something about the pandemic has sort of pushed a load of people who were once in the workforce out of it, changed working practices, and
thinking, why do I have to? I want to go part-time. You heard there from Jeremy Hunt saying a lot of GPs and consultants now working 3 days a week, 4 days a week, not 5 days a week. And that's a problem. These services are falling apart. My interest in politics terms is, at what point is this a problem for the government? Because when you can't get a passport within 10 weeks, if you can't get a driving lesson driving tests organised. When there are big queues for everything, and the post office is a huge queue most times, you feel that the country's grinding to a halt, and you blame the politicians. So at some point, this all will become a problem for the politicians. Currently, it's triaging the issues.
Yeah, I mean, we have really become backlog Britain, haven't we, where everything seems to be, like you said, sort of grinding to a halt. Is this also perhaps a symptom of a chronic lack of investment in infrastructure over a number of years? Perhaps governments have been sitting on their hands a bit too much and not looking ahead to the sort of crises that we're facing.
Well, they put money into some things. HS2, famously, is meant to alleviate... Yeah, don't laugh, Alex. HS2 is meant to alleviate bottlenecks of trains on the West Coast Main Line. That's the new justification for it, away from the speed of the line. So they are doing some things well, and infrastructure is a big thing. It happened really under George Osborne and David Cameron. They agreed to do less capital spending, and Nick Clegg said that was a big mistake. Building more stuff, more infrastructure always means that we get better receipts back as taxpayers.
Problem is there won't be anyone there to build it, will there? Chris, thank you ever so much. Do let me know your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Has backlog Britain really ground to a halt? Or am I don't know, being a bit of a misery guts this Monday? Do let me know. Or tweet us at GBNews. Now, the Ukraine war is already a global conflict. 500 million people across Europe will be wondering how on earth to turn on the lights or boil their potatoes this winter. 400 million more in Africa could be on the brink of famine if 20 million tonnes of grain doesn't make it into shipping routes to some of the most needy countries. And one man has his hand on the tiller of both crises. Having promised to work with Turkey to deliver the food stuck behind a seascape of lethal mines in huge storehouses in Ukraine, Putin then went on to bomb the very port needed to get it out. Having agreed to turn the gas back on to Germany this weekend, Putin has cut the supplies to 40%, enough to earn Russia some rubles while slowly suffocating Europe like a boa constrictor, squeezing energy supplies to the brink of disaster. The only way to stop him? The West has to back off. No more sanctions on Russia, no more weapons to Ukraine. So what does Europe do now in Putin's giant game of geopolitical chess? And how ready are we to face down the worst when nights get longer and days get colder? Brace yourselves. A Russian winter is coming. Well, joining me now on the show is political journalist and commentator George Baginski. George, great to have you back on. It's been a while. I understand you've been talking about just this, the potential energy crisis this winter with Polish MPs, among other stakeholders. What have you learned from speaking to them? Is Europe ready if Putin does turn off the tap?
Yes, Alex, thank you for having me. I remember before this conflict started, there were so many people who were laughing about the potential energy blackmail. It was Donald Trump. Some people called him a caricature, a clown. But when he threatened, when he told Germany that if they get completely reliant, fully obedient to the Russians, they will have problems. And these problems have came much sooner than we predicted. It's not just Germany. Many European countries have just allowed their economies to be so reliant on Russia. Now it is Putin who is almost the kingmaker. He's the decision maker on so many issues. Because whatever Russia has lost by limiting the gas supplies, it has gained by in soaring prices. And these prices have been pushed up to a large extent by Russia's own energy weaponization tactics. So let's keep in mind it's just 40% that's going through Nord Stream 1. And people here in Warsaw say that Putin is pushing Germany to open up Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline that was closed when it was almost finished. We can very clearly see that this blackmail is in place, and we could have predicted it before. The UK gets almost no gas, I think from March of this year, from Russia. Poland is almost fully independent now as well. But what about the other countries? I think it has to be Germany that has to push the diversification of energy in Europe, because at the moment it's them crying to Poland and to Baltic states and to other countries around Europe to give them gas because they cannot get any more from Russia. They have trapped themselves.
Essentially, the lights do go out. There's been a lot of conversation about what's going on in Italy. They are in a worse situation than we are politically at the moment, having just lost their prime minister and are facing snap elections. And people saying there that Russia has very much infiltrated some of the ruling parties in Italy. And there's a big division over whether or not to continue supplying Ukraine with weapons because of the effects that are now taking place, the kickback that we're experiencing in Europe. So what is going to happen if the lights go out? And I don't know why Putin would be so kind as to keep the gas flowing if he doesn't want to. What is Europe going to do?
I strongly hope that Europe will wake up. It has to start from Germany because it is the strongest economy in Europe, and that strongest economy cannot even send simple air defenses to Ukraine to help them protect themselves and bring stability back to our continent. I mean, Estonia, which is one of the smallest economies in Europe, is sending more support to Ukraine than Germany. If we had implemented sanctions, tough sanctions, much quicker, if there was a real solidarity in Europe, then Russians wouldn't be able to push so much and threaten the whole continent. It is now realistic that we will have various crises with inflation we can already see, and the energy prices soaring, but it will get worse. And some people argue that we need to quickly find a peace deal with the Russians. But a deal can only be reached if the two parties are honest, and Russia has to be pushed back as far as possible from Ukraine, and only then we can find a good peace deal. At the moment, if we're thinking of finding an agreement with them while Ukraine is being plundered, their wheat fields are being burned down, we will not reach anywhere. Just after after the Russians and the Ukrainians and the Turks and the United Nations signed the deal, Russians started bombing Odessa, various cities. They're not an honest partner. We have to push them back. And then if we are in the position of strength, we will be able to end the conflict. But we should not be afraid, and we should really push back. And Ukraine needs all the support. This is the only way for us to deal with this. And many people in the UK, they think, oh, this conflict... but not many, but some opinions I've heard that this conflict it has no effect on the UK. That's very wrong, because if Europe is in trouble, if Northern Africa is in trouble, it will have an impact on the UK. So we need to be very involved in bringing stability to Central and Eastern Europe.
George, great to have you back on the show. George Baginski there, he's political commentator and journalist specialising in foreign affairs. Chris, I mean, it's a horrific choice, isn't it, that Europe might have to make this winter between, do we have to start acquiescing to Putin if things get really tough for us?
Well, the answer is no, but we're in quite a bind in this country. Our policy is to support Ukraine. Boris Johnson's policy, of course, that ends on the 5th or 6th of September. And then what? I mean, the hope, I think, the UK's policy is to support Ukraine and hope for regime change in Moscow. Now, if that doesn't happen for 10 years, we're stuck with, in a good way, supporting Ukraine, fighting back the Russian menace. But we're in it for the long term as well. So, and there are no easy solutions to this. The big hope in this country, I think, is to invest heavily in gas storage. That was got rid of a few years ago. A big mistake there because of we're losing when gas is landed in this country, LNG gas, it goes straight out the interconnector into the continent where the gas is more expensive. So it goes where the price is. And that's why I read today we're asking for more supplies back from Belgium, back through the interconnector, because we're running low here. So there was a problem here. I think we need a better gas storage, but I think in the longer term, we are right full square behind Ukraine as things stand with the current government policy.
Yeah, we are not sure the rest of Europe's going to stay as bold with their conviction. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And you have been sending your thoughts throughout the show on the Tory leadership race. Elizabeth says Liz Truss seems to be getting good economic advice while Rishi Sunak is still wedded to the Treasury mindset, which has landed us with inflation and looming recession. Neither can make a speech without notes, which is a pity, but the decisions are what count as far as our future is concerned. And she seems to be sounder. He's been a great disappointment. On reports, over 10,000 Tory members have now signed a petition demanding a vote on whether to accept Boris Johnson's resignation. Catherine says, I feel Mr Johnson has been repeatedly vilified by press, ignoring all the good he has done. We are now instead going to leave your comments and go live to the courts where the mother of Archie Battersby is going to be making a statement.
What they want to put over to the court. Again, we've heard today that Archie's losing weight. He put on 0.4 kilos yesterday. How is that losing weight? He's not absorbing his feeds, he's absorbing his feeds. I've got pictures on my phone of exactly what comes out the other end of Archie, and trust me, it's not diarrhoea.
How are you going to carry on the fight? What are you going to do?
Well, we're going to discuss that with the legal team later, but there is another step, another channel that we're going to go down.
That's the European Court of Human Rights?
Potentially. Potentially.
And possibly
Possibly.
Mr Justice Hayden looking at the evidence about the breathing? Is that another possibility, or
Possibility.
you're not sure?
Possibility.
Were you disappointed that they didn't delay the ruling, given what happened to Paul?
Yes, I am really, because I do think that obviously, you know, he suffers, or he had a heart attack last year, Paul, and I think the stress that this whole process has taken on our whole family, really, it's not right, and I think the legal system does need to be changed. You know, from what we can make out, he's had a heart attack in now.
Do you think they would have been wiser just perhaps putting this ruling back for a couple of days?
Well, like I've said, what's the rush? This whole thing seems ever so rushed. It's been rushed from day one, hasn't it? Or sorry, day two of the hospital. They've insisted on Archie's death from day two. You know, and it seems every court case that we've had, OK, you've got 2 days, you've got 2 days, you've got 2 days, always falling over a weekend.
What is the rush? Do you think it was
like the hospital was saying, he's going to die in 3 weeks anyway. What is the rush?
Did it seem insensitive to you that they didn't delay the case with anything taken in?
Yeah, I do think it's insensitive. I can't say that those particular judges aren't fair judges. I do think that they have listened. But yeah, it is insensitive.
Can you clarify how you're feeling? Because it was said on the court that everyone is now accepting that Archie wouldn't be for the country.
I've never... See, this is another thing that's been put over, that the parents have accepted that Archie's not going to make a full recovery. That's not true. We haven't accepted Archie's not going to make a recovery. We've accepted he's not going to make a full recovery. I think if Archie wakes up and regains consciousness, I don't think anybody's going to know what sort of condition Archie's in.
Holly, GB News here. Can we just ask about the new evidence that you believe that there is in terms of his breathing that you've noticed over the weekend that you say?
Video. I've got several videos.
What does it show on the monitor?
I can show you if you want. I've got a lot of evidence from that hospital.
Can you just describe verbally what the video shows?
The video shows Archie taking breaths. It also shows the white lungs flashing at the top, which means Archie's taking breaths. The ventilator was set at 14 breaths per minute. Archie exceeded that and went up to 18, so which is technically 4 extra breaths.
And over what period of time?
Just sort of a couple of minutes.
And
No, a minute maybe.
And over 2 days?
Yeah, so Friday, I didn't film Fridays because it was just totally unexpected. And then Saturday, my daughter filmed 4 separate videos of Archie.
Are you disappointed the appeal court haven't just delayed their ruling so someone can consider that evidence?
I just think, if I'm honest, I just think it would be nice if the appeal court said, do you know what, the stress on the family has really taken its toll. We can clearly see that with the father today. We can see what the mum's going through and the rest of the family. If the hospital is saying this child's going to pass in a few weeks anyway, just go away and let it happen. You know, just...
Doctors have been very clear, as have a number of judges, that there is no hope of recovery for Archie.
They most certainly have.
It's been cherry-picked.
Yeah, it's definitely been cherry-picked. We seem to be... I think there's 2 countries that... over here, we're quite different to how we view brain injuries. Other countries seem to give you 6 months. Before they even go down minimum before they even go down the lines of brain stem testing, removal of ventilator proceedings. It's just like I've said right from, if you go back to my very first interview. You know, what is the harm in asking for giving him a bit more time?
Tell us about your plans now. When you take us to the European Court of Human Rights.
That is a possibility.
Potentially.
Yeah, potential.
And you want this evidence, you say, which shows him...
Most definitely, as well as a lot of other evidence, totally contradicting what evidence that the hospital have actually given over. With regards to Archie having a bear hugger, he hasn't had a bear hugger for 2 months. Like I've insisted, I've got proof Archie holds his own temperature.
That is Holly Dance, the mother of 12-year-old Archie Battersby, who was found at home with a ligature around his neck, conveyed to hospital where he was put on life support. The Barts Hospital Trust has since wanted to end that particular course of treatment, which would end his life. His mother has appealed it, first of all, to the High Court. They ruled against her. She's appealed again. She hasn't been successful. They've now given her 48 hours to take her case to the European Court of Human Rights. And that was Holly Dance speaking to reporters outside the court, the mother of Archie Battersby. That's all I've got time for today. Join me again, same time, 2 o'clock tomorrow, for We Need to Talk About. And there's lots more coming up on GB News, so do stay tuned for the briefing with Darren first, though. Here's a break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Deborah McCaffrey and here's what's coming up over the next hour. It's a big night for Prime Minister hopefuls Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak as they go head-to-head in a live debate. We'll be previewing the big contest throughout the show and what promises to be a pretty fiery affair. In a speech in Liverpool today, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has outlined his vision for the future of the economy under a Labour government with the message of growth, growth, growth. Are Labour finally on a strategy to win back power? We'll be discussing that as well. And NHS staff shortages are endangering lives, according to the former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt. We'll be discussing what the next Prime Minister needs to do to get a grip on the crisis facing the healthcare service. And as always, want to hear from you on the programme as well. Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet me at gbnews, particularly about that debate tonight. Who are you backing to be the next Conservative leader? But before all of that, at the top of the hour, let's bring you the latest news headlines with Rosie White.
Good afternoon, it's just a couple of minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Appeal court judges say they'll stay the ending of Archie Battersby treatment for 48 hours to allow his parents time to approach the European Court. It comes after judges ruled doctors can lawfully now stop providing Archie with life support treatment. The 12-year-old, who's being treated at the Royal London Hospital, has not regained consciousness since suffering an accident at home 3 months ago. His parents were appealing an earlier High Court ruling, which upheld doctors' conclusions that he was brainstem dead. MPs are warning that the greatest staffing crisis in NHS history is creating a serious risk to patient safety. The Health and Social Care Committee says research shows the health service is short of 12,000 doctors and 50,000 nurses and midwives. It also warns the government has no decisive strategy to help. The former Health Secretary and Committee Chair, Jeremy Hunt, told GB News young doctors are choosing not to stay.
Well, what you're getting at the moment, Esther, is a vicious circle, because people are becoming a GP after 10 years of training. Maybe they're 28, 29 years old. They're finding that seeing 40 patients in one day in 10-minute slots is very stressful. And then they're saying, actually, I don't want to do this every day. I think I'll reduce it to 3 days or 4 days a week. But that, of course, puts more pressure on their colleagues.
An independent review has found Cricket Scotland to be institutionally racist. The report by consultancy firm Plan for Sport cites 448 examples of racism and failings in 29 out of 31 indicators. Cricket Scotland's entire board resigned before the report's publication, saying that would allow new structures to be created to implement the report's recommendations. The final two candidates to become Prime Minister will face their first televised head-to-head debate tonight. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been trading blows over immigration, China and tax cuts. The Foreign Secretary and the former Chancellor are vowing to toughen controls on migration. The Education Secretary, James Cleverly, supports Liz Truss. He told us that Truss has showed she's capable of making tough decisions.
I've seen how she's worked as Foreign Secretary. I've seen how she's conducted herself on the world stage. I've seen how she's taken long-standing, consistent positions on China, for example, on making the most of the fact we've left the European Union. I think that Liz has got an outstanding track record over many, many years on some of the issues that are facing the country today, and I really hope she has the opportunity to explain those fully.
Conservative MP for Thirsk and Moulton, Kevin Hollinrake, backs Rishi Sunak. He told us that Sunak has a clear plan to take the country forward.
She's got all the features we need from somebody who can beat Labour in the next election, which is crucial, of course. He is a genuine, authentic Brexiteer. That's the most important thing right now. I think we need somebody who understands Brexit, who campaigned for Brexit, and somebody who can make the most of it, because I think there's a world of opportunity out there. Rishi's proven himself time and time again over the last 2 years, dealing with two huge crises in this country. First of all, the COVID crisis, and now the cost of living crisis. I think he's got the intellect and the ideas and the ability to innovate and implement.
Police are investigating a death threat that was made against Government Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt. A letter sent to the former Tory leadership's candidate's constituency office reportedly threatened to shoot her in the head. It was received before she was eliminated from the contest to become Prime Minister. Hampshire Police say measures have been put in place to protect Ms Mordaunt and her family. Sir Keir Starmer says the next Labour government will prioritise growth, growth, growth. During a speech in Liverpool, the Labour leader condemned the Tory government's record over the last decade, saying the UK economy is weaker than our competitors. He also criticised the two candidates vying to become Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, saying they don't understand the modern economy. Ukraine expects grain exports through the Black Sea to resume this week after months of Russian blockades. It follows a UN-brokered deal aimed at easing global food shortages. Government officials say the first shipment should leave from the port of Chornomorsk, with all other ports to begin exports within 2 weeks. Some of the UK's major cities are bidding to host Eurovision 2023. Sheffield, Manchester and London have all announced their intention to apply after Britain was asked to replace Ukraine as the hosts of the competition. Boris Johnson says the event will celebrate the Ukrainian people. Earlier this year, the UK was runner-up to the Ukrainian entry Kalish Orchestra. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Darren.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. It is 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon. You're watching us on TV, online, and indeed listening to us on the wireless radio as well. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, politics at Westminster may have taken its traditional summer break, but politics, my word, is far from over this summer because Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak are going to clash later on today in a big TV debate over who, and they've done this today, on the toughest stance on China in their battle to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Sunak, the former Chancellor, said that China represented the largest threat to Britain and the world's security and prosperity this century and proposed a series of measures to reduce Beijing's influence in the UK. But allies of Truss have said that Sunak has been soft on China and that he'd been planning to hold a UK-China economic and finance conference for the first time since 2019. This promises to be one of the key issues in tonight's debate, alongside things like immigration and, of course, the economy and taxation. Well, let's bring in the Conservative Mayor of Tees Valley, that's Ben Howsham. Good afternoon to you, Ben. Thank you. You're backing Rishi Sunak, aren't you? Why is that?
Well, because he's got a track record of actually delivering on the things that he says he's going to do. I mean, as a Brexiteer, as Kevin Hollinrake quite rightly said a few moments ago, he's actually delivered a real tangible outcome from Brexit that others only talk about. So, for example, the free ports that have been set up across the UK were the idea of Rishi Sunak when he was a backbench MP, having campaigned for Brexit. And then he was fortunate enough to be in the Treasury to be able to implement that plan, which, for example, on Teesside has seen us establish the UK's first and largest free port since leaving the European Union.
In saying that, I mean, the British economy is not in a good state, is it? Frankly, now largely that's out of and has been out of the government's hands. But what do you make of the argument put forward by Liz Truss and indeed her supporters, who say if you want to grow the British economy, we need to cut taxes, but we need to cut taxes now?
Yeah, I think you've made the correct point, Darren, in that absolutely it's outside of the control of the government. I mean, inflation is rampant across Europe, it's rampant across North America and elsewhere in the world. And that's ultimately as a result the consequence of lockdown during COVID. Now we're seeing the consequence and the symptoms of that unwind as global supply chains start to try and get back to normal. Now, there will be a trend over the coming months, hopefully, that we start to see some level of normality. But that is a global phenomenon as a result of the pandemic. So I actually think that Rishi did as much as he could, given government policy to support people and support businesses through the pandemic. And yes, we're hearing the leadership contenders talk about tax and tax cuts. And obviously, as a Conservative, I think that people are better placed to spend their own money rather than the government deciding for them. But at the same time, we also have areas like mine, like others across the north of England, that have been left behind for decades. And that does require a level of government spending to get us back to the starting line with other areas like Manchester or London and other major cities that have seen that investment. Now, that requires a level of public funding. So, yes, all for tax cuts, but what's equally as important is the policy platform that helps dictate whether you can cut taxes a huge amount, a little bit, or not at all. And what we're hearing so far from Liz Truss is a lot on tax cuts, but not really what that's going to do. So if you want to cut taxes, fine, cut taxes. If you're going to cut government in half, you're going to cause, huge civil servant redundancies. That is a policy, but I'm not very clear that that is the policy yet, and therefore do the taxes then follow from it? So again, taxes are only a small part of it. Policy is actually the bulk of it, which we're not hearing very much of at the minute.
What would you say to our viewers and, some of them will be Conservative members who will have a say in the weeks to come, who may have taken part in that poll that we saw yesterday, who say they don't trust Rishi Sunak because they feel that he was one of the people that brought down Boris Johnson, that stabbed the Prime Minister in the back? What would you say to those members who frankly don't trust the former Chancellor?
Well, let me just be very clear. My position was that we shouldn't be having this leadership contest. I was very public. I think I came on GBNews and other news outlets claiming just this before Boris Johnson had to stand down. Now, I said that for a number of reasons. One, because I think he was doing a fantastic job for places like Teesside in the north of England, especially around levelling up. But also, we're now seeing exactly what we're talking about here, which is navel-gazing from the Conservative Party, talking about who might be the next leader, while cost of living goes out of control, energy prices continue to rise. We've got a war in Ukraine, and actually we've got a government that's in stasis until a new prime minister comes into play. So I really don't believe we should be here. Unfortunately, we are. That's largely down to a large number of people who for many years have been campaigning against Boris Johnson, and many of them know, and many of your listeners will know exactly who they are. And I think it would be unfair to put all of that on Rishi's shoulders, fundamentally. And I think Rishi was also a huge supporter of the Prime Minister's agenda around levelling up, with looking at things like Freeport's, the Darlington campus, where the Treasury are now moving to Darlington, and many, many others that we can talk about across the country. I think it is unfair. And also, fundamentally, people say, well, can we trust Rishi Sunak? Well, you can actually look at somebody who's got a track record of doing what they say they will do in high office, whereas I don't necessarily think Liz has the same record.
I mean, there's lots of suggestions that people want to see Boris Johnson on the ballot paper, that members feel that they should have a say. I mean, do you think that's plausible? Do you think, in many ways, actually maybe this should be revisited?
Well, like I said to you, Darren, I think the Conservative Party will regret what happened over recent months to Boris Johnson. Unfortunately, I think we're at a point now where we are past the point of no return. I don't think that is now feasible, but I do think we could, in theory, if things go the wrong way, be looking back in a couple of years' time. And I think there'll be certain people, particularly certain members of Parliament, who should be looked at and should bear the responsibility of where we could get to in 2 years' time if it does go wrong, because I don't think we had to end up here, but unfortunately we are where we are, and I don't think that is likely or really plausible to be reversed.
Who are you talking about, Ben? You keep alluding to these people, but I mean, who are you talking about?
Well, there have been lots of people in Parliament that have stood against Boris Johnson since the day he became Prime Minister, and there's been a huge undermining of his authority, irrespective of his insurgency, his new policy agenda for things like levelling up, for rebalancing the country, for having a pride and an optimism that we haven't seen in this country for a long, long time, because for some reason certain politicians think we need to be almost embarrassed of being British. He got rid of a lot of that. So there were Conservative MPs on the backbenches who continued to undermine the Prime Minister. I also think there is a very London-centric view of Boris Johnson that doesn't necessarily reflect across the country. I'm not saying everybody in the rest of the country loves Boris Johnson, but London has a very peculiar view of Boris, and I think there is a mainstream media / Whitehall view that sees him as the pariah, when actually there is a much more nuanced conversation to have about Boris Johnson.
OK, and just very finally, and quickly if you can as well, Ben, just about Nadine Dorries' tweet, I'm sure you saw it earlier on, attacking Rishi Sunak for his Prada shoes, which cost hundreds of pounds in comparison to Liz Truss's Claire's accessories earrings. I mean, is that helpful in a leadership race, these kind of blue on blue attacks?
Well, I was with Rishi in Teesside when he had those shoes on, and I must say mine only cost £25 from Marks and Spencer's. So, you know, wearing Prada shoes on a building site probably isn't necessarily the smartest thing to do. However, it's pretty churlish, isn't it? It doesn't really necessarily get to those important points around tax cuts, around the benefits of Brexit, around policy. It's not particularly helpful. And I would also always take the opportunity to remind people, including Nadine, who put that tweet out, that Teesside is spelt with 2 S's and not 1.
OK, Ben Hersham. As always, appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's the mayor there of Tees Valley. Well, let's go to Westminster. Let's get the latest on this contest. Join Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, who is there for us. Tom, good afternoon to you. So we've got this big debate in a couple of hours' time, or later on tonight, on the BBC. What are you expecting? Because what we've seen in the past has been quite punchy, quite spicy at times. Are we likely to see more of that tonight?
Yes, this is the first head-to-head debate between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, and potentially a different dynamic now compared to the two previously publicised television debates that we've had before. Back at those previous two debates, it was before those final two were announced, when most of the media was describing Rishi Sunak as the front-runner in this contest. Conversely now, we're more than a week on, and it seems like the odds have flipped, and the media is now describing Liz Truss as that front-runner, looking at all of those polls where she has such a consistent lead amongst the membership. So potentially that very dynamic will change things. The way that Rishi Sunak had been running his campaign up until this weekend had been that of a frontrunner, trying to say very little in terms of policy and let everyone else scrap it out amongst themselves. Well, since then, since those polls that have placed Rishi Sunak behind, we've had a barrage of policy from the former Chancellor. Whether it's policy on China, whether it's policy on migration, he seems to be trying to get ahead of that debate. So potentially a difference now in what we'll see tonight compared to before. We might see a more policy-heavy debate. Of course, there were all of those criticisms of that last debate on ITV, where really those candidates were taking scraps out of each other. They had the opportunity to ask questions of each other, and blue on blue did come out in spades. Now, many people in Westminster, many people in Parliament said that that was the wrong way to conduct this campaign, that the only winner of interactions like that was the Labour Party. The only winner of that sort of blue-on-blue action was Sir Keir Starmer. So that might well be in the back of these candidates' minds as they want to move this contest forward, because this contest goes on for a very long time. And the briefing, not directly from the candidates themselves, but from those around the candidates, has been getting increasingly fraught, increasingly bitter. Let's see if that continued bitterness makes its way to the television screens tonight. I think if I were advising either of these campaigns, it would be time to dial back the personal attacks, dial back talking about which school whatever candidate went to or how expensive their suits are, and get on to the real policy discussions. I think that's what the Conservative membership want to see.
In saying that, though, if Rishi Sunak is behind, as you say, as the poll seems to suggest, and he's portraying himself as the underdog, and the postal ballots are going out in a week's time, there's not much chance, is there, really, to, if you like, for him to take on Liz Truss in maybe a way in which he can win those debates, because he does need to win the arguments. He needs to win those Conservative members if he's going to win the race, frankly.
He certainly does, but unlike in previous Conservative leadership elections, he does have two chances. Unlike in previous Conservative leadership elections, there's not just one opportunity for members to cast their votes. Yes, most members by precedent will start casting their ballots when they land through on their doormats at the start of next week. However, if Conservative members see something that makes them change their mind halfway through this election campaign, if they do decide to switch from one candidate to another, they can submit a second vote online that would override their postal ballot in person. Whichever vote lands in last will be the vote that is counted. So potentially this idea that this contest really is going to be sewn up in the first week or two, that might be erroneous, given that opportunity for Conservative members to switch their vote if they so choose later on.
Tom, as always, appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Holwood, our political correspondent, joining us from Westminster. Let's bring in Conservative commentator Alex Dean, who joins us down the line, waiting patiently by. Alex, thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, have you publicly said who are you backing in this race? Who would you like to see as the next Conservative leader, and why, I suppose?
Yeah, I support Liz Truss because I want us to stimulate the economy and get to tax cuts as soon as possible. But with due respect, Aaron, I think that's the wrong place to start this discussion. I think the right place to start is that I'd have taken any of the contenders, not just from this pair, but from the long list against Keir Starmer. I think any of them can beat the Labour Party at the next election. And the candidates would do well to reflect on that and remember that we've got to stick together as a Tory party and come out the other side of this contest, a fighting force ready to take it to Labour, rather than exhausting ourselves beating each other up before the real contest, which will be a general election. So whilst I am a supporter of Liz Truss, and I think we should have a small state and a freer market, and I find her message compelling, the right place to start for me is that I'm a Tory. For better or for worse, and some people don't like that at all, but if you are a Conservative, and that's the whole of the electorate for this contest, that's the point to start, not which candidate you prefer.
In saying that, I assume then you wouldn't agree with, Nadine Dorris tweeting and trying to attack Rishi Sunak for what he's wearing.
Yeah, I've never liked this sort of thing, whether it be about, what Angela Rayner wears in the House of Commons or what Theresa May's footwear or now Rishi Sunak's shoes. I always find that sort of thing daft, no matter who's doing it and who's saying it. You may recall there was some suggestion about Jeremy Corbyn not wearing appropriate clothing to the Cenotaph one year. And that was an attack that was quite vicious and bit quite deep, because it suggested he didn't respect the war dead and so forth. And I at the time said I thought that was completely wrong, that I thought that Corbyn had shown appropriate respect, albeit in his own unique style. That's just not the sort of politics I go in for. I'm not particularly having a go at those that do. It's just not my words and not my style. And I think, moreover, we've got to try and preserve that sense that we are a united party having a discussion about who should lead us, rather than having a war-to-the-knife battle between two opposing tribes. Because in the end, you've got to try and put these bits of a party back together, not just to govern, but then to fight an election against the Labour Party, which must be the most important thing if you think keeping Labour out of government is a vital national interest, as I do.
But in saying that, there is this big divide, isn't there, really, on the economy and taxation. How can let's say your candidate Liz Truss wins, can Rishi Sunak and maybe the 137 MPs who backed him, can they really support Liz Truss's economic plan when Rishi Sunak's not just saying it's wrong, he's saying it's irresponsible and fairy tale economics?
Well, Rishi Sunak's, of course, in a difficult position on the economy, because he can't say we've got to have a big change, because until recently he was running the economy. On the other hand, it's a very unexciting thing to say, I'm not going to deliver any kind of new mandate or any new policy. So I sympathise with the Sunak position. He's in a bind about the economy, having been Chancellor for some time until very recently. But parties reinvent themselves in government. Parties are able to come up with and create new policies. And one of the things I would point to in that is that the depth, the bench that we just had of people running for the election to leader of the party means that it's not just about Sunak and Truss. Either one of them, when elected leader, is going to have the opportunity to make a new cabinet and a new leadership. And that, I will confidently predict, will contain exciting people, quite new to the public eye, like Kemi Badenoch, who are going to come to roles with a breath of fresh air and a sense of new dynamism. And that's what you seize upon. And yes, I do think, because I'm not dodging your question, I think that means we can be inspired by the new leadership. And the big hope has got to be, the expectation has got to be, we have a contest, you accept the result at the end, whichever way it is, and you serve under the other person's leadership. That's proper conservatism. That's the right thing to do. And that's what means we can go on, govern better, and then beat Labour at the next election.
OK, Alex, as always, really appreciate your time and your thoughts and analysis this afternoon. Thank you, Alex Dean there, joining us down the line. OK, you're watching GB News. Do get in touch, by the way, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet me at gbnews. I say a lot of politics around, particularly that Conservative leadership race. We're going to take a quick break, though. We'll be back in just a matter of minutes, so stay tuned.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Well, let's turn to Labour now, because speaking in Liverpool earlier, the leader Sir Keir Starmer laid out his vision for the next general election, vowing to fight it on economic growth. And he did miss an opportunity to take swipes at both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak's economic visions. Here's what the Labour leader had to say.
Labour will fight the next election on economic growth. There is no task more central to my ambitions for Britain than making the country and its people better off. Now, tonight I think you'll hear two other candidates for Prime Minister who will also define the choice for their party to be about the economy and about growth. But what a choice it is. In one corner you have Rishi Sunak, the architect of the cost of living crisis. In the other you have Liz Truss, the latest graduate from the School of Magic Money Tree Economics. Neither of them has the answers to the economic challenges that we face. We need three things: growth, growth, growth. We must be clear about the kind of growth that we need. The growth I want for Britain is strong, secure, and fair. Strong because it will build a foundation where every business and every person plays a role. Secure, because it will produce good jobs that don't leave people feeling insecure. And fair, because it will unlock the potential of every place, every community, every town, and every city. So today I can announce we will establish an Industrial Strategy Council, and we will go further by putting it on a statutory footing. It will provide advice that shapes policy in the way the Climate Change Committee does, or the Office of Budget Responsibility, a permanent part of the landscape that sets out our strategic national priorities that go beyond the political cycle, brings in the expertise of business, science and unions, holds us to account for our decisions, and builds confidence for investors that will boost long-term growth and productivity.
Sir Keir Starmer speaking a little bit earlier on in Liverpool. Let's bring in Peter Edwards, the former editor of Labour List, who joins us down the line. Peter, good afternoon to you. What did you make of that?
Well, I thought it was a decent speech, but it reflects the reality that Keir Starmer faces, that he's trying to hone his attack on the government without any of us being able to say who the leader of the government is or will be at the time of the next general election. But we've got a flavour of both. What it told me is perhaps Liz Truss, if she wins, will be slightly more challenging to attack because, as Keir Starmer did, you can pin the cost of living crisis on Rishi Sunak because he was Chancellor. Liz Truss obviously has been dealing with Ukraine primarily and Brexit, which lots of Labour people backed in the north of England. So the critique around Liz Truss is a bit more challenging. I think on the actual the detail of what he announced. I like the idea of this industrial council. Now, the name of it might sound a little bit old-fashioned, a little bit 1970s, but the idea that you set up a body away from politicians to support growth is very sensible, and it's been something that's done before with the National Infrastructure Commission, a Labour idea that George Osborne very happily borrowed in 2015.
In saying that, when you look at our growth, it's been pretty low, pretty bad actually, for the last 10, 12, 13 years, really since the financial crisis, and our productivity hasn't been great either. And yet, in the public's eyes, to a large degree, the Conservatives are still regarded as more competent when it comes to the economy, hence why they won in 2015, 2017, 2019. Can Keir Starmer really turn that around?
He can, but you've laid out the challenge, and I worked for Labour's Shadow Treasury team when Ed Balls was Shadow Chancellor, and enjoyed it very much. But of course, we had, I think in 2010 to 2015, it was the longest decline in living standards since the 19th century. There was some growth then, but very limited growth. Since then, we've had the EU referendum, which, whatever you think about it, created uncertainty and deterred investment, and COVID. The issue for Labour and Keir Starmer is, because you do need to win the war on the airwaves and win people's votes, is those things are all in the past. You know, David Cameron, George Osborne made bad decisions. So did Theresa May. So did Boris Johnson. But Labour needs to do more than win an argument on past economic decisions, because people always vote on the basis of the future.
Fascinating stuff. Peter, as always, thank you. Peter Edwards there, joining us down the line. Cheers, Peter. Right, we're going to pause there on GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll talk about the Rwanda migration plan, Jeremy Hunt's warning about the National Health Service, and also, should Boris Johnson be on the ballot for Conservative members? That and much more between now and 4. But first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines. Back to Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Appeal court judges say they'll stay the ending of Archie Battersby's treatment for 48 hours to allow his parents time to approach the European courts. It comes after they ruled doctors can lawfully stop providing Archie with life support treatment. The 12-year-old hasn't regained consciousness since suffering an accident at home several months ago. His parents were appealing an earlier High Court ruling which upheld doctors' conclusions that he was brainstem dead. Archie's mother, Holly Dance, spoke of the evidence she has. She says her son is still showing further signs of breathing on his own.
I said to the nurse on shift at the time, which is quite funny because apparently she hasn't seen anything, and according to the response of the hospital today, I turned around and said to the nurse, "Did you see that?" She went, "I did see that." She then come over and shook. She said, "Oh, maybe there's water in it," so shook the ventilator. Archie continued the breaths, so it was clearly nothing to do with water.
An independent review has found Cricket Scotland to be institutionally racist. The report by the consultancy firm Plan for Sport cited 448 examples of racism and failings in 29 out of 31 indicators. Cricket Scotland's entire board resigned before the report's publication, saying that would allow new structures to be created to implement the report's recommendations. The final 2 candidates to become Prime Minister will face their first televised head-to-head debate tonight. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been trading blows over immigration, China and tax cuts. The Foreign Secretary and the former Chancellor are vowing to tighten controls on migration. Ukraine expects grain exports through the Black Sea to resume this week after months of Russian blockades. It follows a UN-brokered deal aimed at easing global food shortages. Government officials say the first shipment should leave from the port of Chornomorsk, with all other ports to begin exports within 2 weeks. Some of the UK's major cities are bidding to host Eurovision 2023. Sheffield, Manchester and London have all announced their intention to apply after Britain was asked to replace Ukraine. Boris Johnson says the event will celebrate the Ukrainian people. Earlier this year, the UK was the runner-up to the Ukrainian entry, Kalish Orchestra. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. Let's return to our top story this afternoon, and that is that appeal court judges have ruled that doctors can stop providing life support treatment to 12-year-old Archie Battersby. Well, Alice Porter is outside the court for us this afternoon. Alice, we've been hearing from the family, haven't we? I know you're joined by them. This is a really, really difficult case indeed.
Hi there, good afternoon. Yeah, this is absolutely not a decision that the family wanted. This has been a legal battle that has been going on for a number of months now, and obviously this is not the decision they wanted. And I'm joined by Holly Dance, who is Archie's mother. I'm so sorry by the decision. You obviously must be very disappointed.
Yeah, I feel a bit numb. I suppose I'm still in this fight and flight mode. I'm just, I'm just a bit numb.
You said earlier that this country has a problem with euthanising people like your son. What did you mean by that?
Well, so take for instance, Archie's not the first. You had little Charlie Gard, you had Alfie Evans. They wanted to do the same with Tafida. Tafida Keep, obviously, they won that case. It seems to be like legal in this country, and these are children. Like, what is going on? They're kids.
And what will the next steps be for you? Because you've put forward in court that there's some new evidence that Archie was breathing over the weekend. So where does that leave your kind of court battle? Would you be going back to Mr Justice Hayden in the High Court?
There's options.
Yeah, there's options.
Quite a few options that we've got a little bit of time to go over.
We realise that we are coming to an end now, but like I said from day one, I will fight to get my little boy time. I just think it's a shame that the whole family and close friends have had to go through all of this traumatic experience, like, to do it. If it comes down to funding, the amount that it's taken or cost the NHS to take us to court and go through these proceedings, they could have kept Archie on a ventilator, no questions asked, for 6 months.
Now, the sort of toll it's obviously put on your family was very much shown by Archie's father having a suspected heart attack this morning in court. Is there any update on how he's doing?
He didn't feel well from when he got up this morning. He's been extremely stressed. He was in A&E, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, after one of the hearings with chest pains. They said the levels had gone up and he was close to a heart attack then. He was told to go and take it easy, which we haven't, none of us have been able to take it easy. You know, it's because he's very supportive, Archie's dad, and he wants to be part of this. He's still come today, and we spoke to him, spoke to his girlfriend Janice and Kelly early on the phone on our way here, and I just said, just take him to hospital. And she went, no, he's adamant, he's going to be there today for this court case. He's adamant. And when we got up there, like, as soon as I saw him, I went, Paul, you look grey, like, you don't look good. And then he's sweating, obviously they've put him on all the machines and taken him straight to hospital. And where he's residing at least tonight.
And finally, how far are you willing to go? I mean, if you're unsuccessful in the British courts, I mean, is the European Court of Human Rights, is that an option for you?
It most certainly is one of the options. I can only go as far as this justice system over here allows me to take it, but I will go to the end of what I can legally go to.
Well, look, thank you very much for speaking to us. Really, really appreciate it. I know you've got to get on with the other interview, so thank you so much. Well, there you go. That was Holly Dance, who is the mother of Archie Battersby, who's been very much spearheading the campaign to keep him on the life support machine that he has been dependent on ever since he was in an accident just over 3.5 months ago.
OK, Alice, thank you very much indeed for that. Alice Porter there joining us outside at the Royal Courts of Justice this afternoon. OK, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been accused of cruelty and immorality for promising more Rwanda-style deals to remove asylum seekers from the UK, as charities claim that the pair were pandering to party members' hardline views. Amnesty International led criticism of the immigration plans announced over the weekend by the Tory leadership candidates, saying that the dreadful pledges would come at great human and financial cost. Other human rights groups and opposition parties and the Adam Smith Institute have also condemned proposals on the grounds ranging from ethics to the crippling costs it involves. Well, joining me now is the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. Good afternoon to you, Kelvin. I assume you don't agree with Amnesty International and these other human rights groups?
Well, I mean, they're entitled to their view, but they don't have to foot the bill nor face the significant issues which our country faces. I mean, there are 110,000 people in our nation right now who are still waiting to find out whether they're going to be allowed to stay or go. We should not be having this conversation in a kind of logical manner, because there is no logic in allowing tens of hundreds of thousands of people to come across the channel. It's as straightforward as that.
In saying that, I mean, the reason we've got 110,000 people still waiting to find out whether they can stay in the country is because the processing is horrifically slow. We're going to do a report in a couple of minutes where there's a distinct lack of doctors and nurses in our health service. We know it in every sector of the economy, there's a real shortage of workers. Would it make more sense to process these claims quicker and potentially get some of these people into work?
Well, no, I'm not in favour. I'm definitely not in favour of that particular idea. I must be honest. I'm much more in favour of Truss's idea, which is opening up other opportunities in Africa for people to wait there, rather than, because if we gave the signal to the Middle East or to most of Africa that you can come over here and basically would give you a visa, forget about 110,000 people waiting for their visas. There would be about 10 million, perhaps 50 million people coming here. You know, we are not the solution to the global problems of people struggling to find work, and it is unfair to lump it on us. And anyway, these people are coming through other countries. Why don't those other countries simply take them if that is the case? But look, at the end of the day, there is no doubt that one of the reasons why Truss is going to win by a country mile over Rishi is that she believes fervently in the Rwanda Plus prospect for migrants. Any politician, Labour, Lib Dem, Tory, whatever, who came up with a solution to the Channel migrants issue would win an election, hands down, which is the only reason I believe that Starmer is going to win by a country mile, unfortunately. But it's the only reason why there's a question mark about Starmer and friends.
But in saying that, I mean, we talk about these Rwanda-style deals, but the whole point is the Rwanda plan hasn't worked so far. There's not been a single migrant who's gone there.
That's a good question. It's a good question, but where are the answers to all this? Where are the answers to all this? We have been facing this issue in a massive way over the last sort of 3 years, but it's existed before. People trying to get in, now they're coming by boat. But nobody has turned around and said, no matter how controversial, let's do something positive about it. I mean, have you seen what Labour are saying? Have you seen what Labour have saying? Labour are saying, we're going to put a load of detectives into Belgium, and with a bit of luck, we'll find the smugglers that way. Can I tell you, they've got more chance of whistling Dixie out their rear end than solving the problem with that solution. There is no easy solution, nor no populist solution. What we do need to do is we do need to find something, and we do need to spend some money to find it.
Well, so one of the ways of dealing it, people suggest, including, it must be said, Anne Whitcomb, the former Home Office Minister, says that the reason these migrants, some of them, not all of them, make the journey across the Channel and don't stay in places like France and Belgium is because we've got a black market here where you do not... She says ID cards would solve this. Her argument is they've got ID cards in France and Belgium. It's much more difficult to get work legitimately there. It's so much easier in Britain. That's why people come here. If we introduced ID cards, you would see the numbers drop off pretty much immediately.
Well, I don't know whether Miss Widdicombe is right about that or not, and I don't know in what way it has solved issues in France, which look pretty horrendous to me in the outlying estates of Paris. However, I do agree with the fact that there is a huge, are you allowed to say black economy? I have a question mark about that, to be honest with you. But because there are loads of companies in our country and in the high street who only deal in cash. Once you deal in cash, then you do have the prospect of being able to pay people in cash without HMRC being involved. So I suspect that the first thing we probably would have to do is we'd have to force everybody either to offer a cash or card alternative, and that might help that problem that Ms Widdicombe is highlighting.
Very finally, Kelvin, just to pick you up on Keir Starmer, why do you think Labour are on course to win their next election? Mainly
because I don't believe right now, let's hope, look, Liz Truss is going to win by 1,000 miles. So I feel sorry for Rishi, a perfectly incredible economist and businessman, but there's a whole load of reasons why he can't win. So Liz Truss is basically mad, and mad politicians have done rather well. Whether it's Boris or it's Trump or whatever, they've triumphed. Starmer is turning up and saying, trust me, I'm a doctor. But if you listen to what he said today, it was honestly laughable. Did you hear him say setting up this business strategy council? And he said we can then rely on the expertise of businessmen. Yes. Some others, yes. And the expertise of trade unions. Round my way, they're just about to stop taking the bins away for 3 weeks, right? Honestly, the trains aren't running. You won't get, the idea that there is any expertise in the trade union movement except how to destroy people's lives is ridiculous and something which should hang round Starmer's neck.
Okay, Kelvin, as always, appreciate your punchy views. Thank you very much indeed, Kelvin Mackenzie there. Join us down the line. GBViews at gbnews.uk, by the way, or tweet us at GBNews. Maybe you are in a trade union and an ordinary worker and very much disagree with what Kelvin Mackenzie's just had to say. Anyway, let's move on and talk about the National Health Service now, because MPs have said the NHS is facing its greatest workforce crisis in history, which could put safety at serious risk. A study shows that around 62,000 positions are unfilled. There's a crisis in midwifery and there are 700 fewer full-time equivalent GPs than 3 years ago. Well, earlier, Esther McVeigh spoke to the former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt, who's behind this report on the crisis facing the NHS.
Jeremy, bit of a damning report here, and it's a whole host of things: bullying, sexism, pensions. So how are we going to solve the problem?
Well, good morning, or in fact, good afternoon, Esther. I'm very pleased to be with you on the show. I think the truth is there are lots of things that you would find in any large organisation. I mean, no one is completely free of, bullying and harassment and all those kinds of issues. But the fundamental problem that we lay bare in this report is our failure as a country to train enough doctors and nurses over very many years. And that is because government after government has said, it doesn't matter if we don't quite train enough doctors because we can always import them from overseas. And the fact is that COVID was a global pandemic. Everyone's got their COVID backlog. There's a shortage of 2 million doctors and 15 million nurses worldwide. And it is just time we took a decision as a country that we have the biggest health system in the world with the NHS. We're going to train the numbers we actually need.
So I've seen the vacancies are 105,000 or thereabouts, and we need an extra, near as damn it, 500,000 by 2034. So, I have to say there's a couple of questions here. How are we going to pay for it, and where are we going to get all those people if we're already short of 105,000?
Well, it's actually 500,000 more people we'll need in the NHS and 500,000 more in the social care system. So it's about 1 million altogether. And there has never been any shortage of people who want to work in these sectors. I mean, universities are full of people who want to become doctors and nurses. And indeed, there are people who don't go to university who want to work in the care system, and they do an absolutely brilliant job. We do have to pay more. It's true that it costs 250 grand to train a doctor. But if you don't train enough, all that happens is what happens now, which is that we spend £6 billion a year on locum doctors and agency nurses because there is this big shortage. And so we are wasting more money than countries like France and Germany on these temporary doctors and agency nurses when we shouldn't be. And that's why it's just a false economy not to train enough doctors in the first place.
But I am going to press you a little bit more here on the culture issues, because I see that 7% of doctors are quitting within 3 years of qualifying. So something has to be wrong if lots of people want to work there, if so many are quitting straight away. And I have to say, 77% of women make up the workforce, and yet they don't think they've got the opportunities to excel or become surgeons. They think there's a bit of a Me Too culture there, sexual harassment and bullying. So I want to drag us right back to that culture issue. What is going wrong in the NHS?
Well, there are definitely those issues. And so what young doctors and young nurses often talk about is the intensity and the pressure of work. Last year, we lost 500,000 days to stress, anxiety, and other psychiatric conditions. Those are properly diagnosable conditions. That's 500,000 days of work from NHS staff. But we also have a lot of women, as you say, a lot of people from ethnic minorities, and some parts of the medical establishment have been traditionally a closed shop for men. It's been, a bit like the old boys club, but that has changed, and we now have we've had very distinguished female presidents of the Royal College of Surgeons, the Royal College of Physicians, people leading British Medical Association. So things have been improving, but I think there is still a lot of glass ceilings in the NHS, which, just like every other organisation, they need to get rid of.
That was Jeremy Hunt speaking a little earlier on to Esther McVeigh, the Conservative MP, about that report into the National Health Service. Well, let's turn back to the Conservative leadership race now, because there is certainly anger among some Conservative members that over 10,000 of them so far have signed up calling on Boris Johnson to be allowed back onto the ballot paper and to stay on as Prime Minister. The petition demands that Boris Johnson's name is allowed to appear alongside that of Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss when members go to vote on the matter. Well, David Campbell-Bannerman is a former Conservative MEP who's been leading the campaign to get Boris Johnson back on the ballot paper and joins me down the line. David, very good afternoon to you. What's the idea behind this then? Because I thought even Boris had recognised that he was having to make way for whoever takes over.
Well, he's obviously he's not actually gone yet. He's not actually resigned yet. He said he's going to resign. What we're actually asking for is a Boris Ballot, as we're calling it, which is the opportunity for the members to have a yes or no vote, a separate ballot, so we don't get involved with the Sunak Truss ballot at all. It just gives the membership an opportunity to say yay or nay to Boris. And if it's no, then you've got the choice of the two replacements to go forward as leader. And if it's a yes, Boris carries on, but hopefully will take on a lot of the great ideas that have come out during this leadership selection contest and some of the good people there as well.
Questions on that. First of all, though, we live in a parliamentary democracy, don't we? I mean, fundamentally, whoever the leader of a party is, or indeed the Prime Minister, it's up to MPs. It's not up to ordinary folk like you and I.
Well, it should be up to the membership. I mean, obviously the membership have the right to change.
But that would change our entire system. We've got a parliamentary democracy in this system. You want a presidential system?
No, I'm not calling for a presidential, but I mean, the membership are choosing between Sunak and Truss at the moment, so they have the last word. And MPs, obviously, they report to their members in many ways. Obviously, they're selected by them, deselected by them sometimes. So they do represent the membership as well as, obviously, the constituents. So we think it's a very fair democratic vote. We're doing it through conservativepost.co.uk if people are interested in more information. We think it's very important for democracy that there's a buy-in. Otherwise, we risk real damage to the Conservative Party from thousands of members leaving. We've seen the polls crashing, by the way, the national polls, several national polls, showing that Boris is really worth about 10%. We've seen falls of about 10%. We're only 3 or 4% behind after all this Partygate allegations, and now it's crashed to nearly 14% behind Labour. So, real urgency here not to stop Starmer winning the next election.
Just very finally and really quickly, you've got about 20 seconds, though. Couldn't this just lead to what we saw with Jeremy Corbyn, where the membership wanted him, but MPs didn't? And that didn't go very well, did it?
No, I don't think you can equate it. We're clever Conservatives, our members. We're not mad Marxists as in the Labour Party. I don't think it's a great parallel or an analogy, actually. It's just a reasonable request. Let's get it done. If it's a no, then we can all move on, unite behind a new leader. But if it's yes, then we can have a rejigged government.
OK, we'll see how it goes. David Campbell-Bannerman, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon here on GB News. OK, that's it from me for today. Of course, that debate is on tonight. We'll have full coverage. I'm going up to Stoke-on-Trent just immediately after this programme, throughout the evening and tomorrow morning here on GB News. Up next, it is Mark Longhurst standing in for Colin Brazier between 4 and 6. But we'll leave you with the weather this afternoon from the Met Office. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Showers today will ease overnight with clear spells. It will be a cool night and then a better chance of sunny spells and many places staying dry on Tuesday. Low pressure has been drifting into Scandinavia through the day, but around that low, a weather front has brought some lively downpours to eastern Scotland into northern England as well, and those showers or even longer spells of rain will push south overnight, eventually easing, but still further showers to come for northwest England into North Wales, the Midlands and East Anglia by the end of the night. A lot of cloud in this zone as well. Showers also continue to arrive into the northwest of Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland. In between, some clear spells and temperatures in some sheltered spots dipping to 5 to 8 Celsius. So a fresh start to Tuesday, but for many it's a dry and bright start, a legacy of cloud across northern, central and southern England. That may take some time to break up.